לבותינו, בימים ההם בזמן הזה. על הכסף, על הפורקן ועל הפורים ועל הגשרות ועל המלחמות שעשית לבותינו, בימים ההם בזמן הזה. ועל הגבולות ועל התשועות ועל המלחמות שעשית לבותינו, בימים ההם בזמן הזה. על הניסים ועל הפורקן ועל הגבולות ועל התשועות ועל המלחמות שעשית לבותינו, בימים ההם בזמן הזה.
First of all, let's give a round of applause to our musicians, the three drummers, and Deborah Ben Dayan. Thank you very much for that Hanukkah melodies. So I'm Stanley Messer, Stan Messer, and I am your MC for the evening. And we have a wonderful evening planned. But wow, this is to me amazing. 50 years of the Highland Park Minyan. How about that? So to start off our program, I'll invite to the mic Steve Richmond, who is the chair of the Highland Park Minyan, to welcome all of you and to thank a few individuals who helped make this evening possible. Steve.
Thank you, Stan. Good evening, Highland Park Minyan. It's really nice seeing everybody here. So many people, and to think about how important the Minyan was in your lives. A couple of you that I spoke to have already told me that. Thank you for...
Speak into the microphone. Close to the mic.
You can't hear me? Which part did you not hear?
Start over.
Okay, welcome everybody. And it's really nice seeing so many people here. And I've talked with a couple of people, and the Minyan has made a big difference in your life. And thank you for coming. I'm sure that if we took a poll tonight, that many of you have played an important role in enabling the Minyan to get to where we are today, 50-something years into the Minyan. So thank you again. My job, and I'm happy to do it, is to especially thank those of you who made the evening possible, all of the planning, all of the execution. So I start with Judy Richmond. Lisa Raza. And even though his initials are SM, or MS, if he puts the last name first, the MC, Stan, sir. These three individuals who are on the planning committee, and I'd like to also thank Judy for chairing the committee and leading us through the many different aspects getting here tonight. And believe me, there was a lot of effort, coordination, decision-making, problems, etc. So what seems simple is not so simple. Which leads me to Debbie Reburen for all of the troubleshooting, especially the things that came up with the venue here, all at the last minute and all resolved. Debbie, you are a great troubleshooter. So on the technical side, thank you to Dahlia Rosenstein Gokermak for creating a video montage. Gary Leslie for doing the recording of the program tonight. And to David Schiff for the speakers that are giving us the audio tonight. And Deborah and David Schiff put together, this beautiful 80-picture memory book of activities in the Minyan. So if you haven't seen it, come up and stand over the piano and take a look at it. On the entertainment side, thank you to all of our Davids tonight who performed. So David Schiff, David Goldfarb, and David Schlossberg, and honorary David, Deborah and David, for playing and singing. And now I wish you all a good, continued, happy, fun evening, and I'll turn it back to MSMC, Stan Messer.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Steve has really been a stalwart of the Minyan. He's been chairing it for the last 3 years and did just about every other kind of duty before that. So I would like to introduce, I'd like to introduce everyone, but I'm going to introduce 7 guests who have come from afar. And if I've left someone out, please let me know. So, Rabbi Sue Gulak from upstate New York. I will ask everyone to stand at the end. Hold it, Sue, before you get up. Rabbi Gerald Serrata from the Washington, D.C. area. Neil Reisner from Florida, and I believe he has come the furthest of anyone to be here tonight. Ilana Messer-Weil and Sean Weil, who have come from Massachusetts. Rhoda Zoller-Samuel, who has come from Connecticut. And Hope Eisdorfer-Levin, who has come from Pennsylvania. Have I missed anyone? We won't count New York, but anywhere else. Okay. Very good. Great. Yeah, so let's have those 7 people stand up and everyone can clap and recognize them. So I'd also like to introduce the founders of the Minyan. And if anyone else has a different idea of the history and narrative of the Minyan, I'll tell you in advance there's going to be an open mic. You can tell your own story about it. But as I recall, and I've confirmed this with at least 1 or 2 people, there were 3 couples who were introduced to each other by Rabbi Steve Shaw, who was then the, I believe, associate director of Rutgers Hillel. And that includes Joe and Judy Rosenstein. If you'd like to stand, no, okay. Stanley and Donna Messer. And Rafe Zoller, Zichrono Livracha. And Rhoda Zoller-Samuel, who is here with us tonight. So just to let you know, and other people I'm quite sure will embellish on this, that the six of us started meeting in each other's houses in our living rooms to study Torah on a Shabbat afternoon. And that somehow, and here I'm not exactly sure how, morphed into services, really with the inspiration not only of Steve Shaw, but of Joe. And maybe Joe will elaborate on that when he speaks a little later. All right, so at this time, I want us to be reminded of those people who were once part of the Minyan, but who have passed away. We remember the following with fondness and appreciation. Judy Steigler, Ronnie Trube, Herschel Matt, Amy Adina Schulman, David Langer, Miriam Bro, Joan Ehrenfeld, Raphael Zoller, Ken Kesson, Mel Schulman, Arthur Miller, Ann Langer, Judy Newman, Anna Beck, John Steele, Lynn Miller, Gila Naiman, Gustine Matt, Kathy Olstein, Laura Spicer, Abe Azovsky, Dahlia Leslie, Zichronam Livracha. May their memory be a blessing. So I'm now very happy to introduce Judy Richmond, who is the Chesed chair of the Minyan, who in turn will introduce Matt Hirsch. Judy.
Hello everybody, and Mazel Tov to each of you who is the Highland Park Minyan. Our tradition teaches us Hakarat HaTov, recognizing the good. And even in the midst of all of the tzores in the world right now, we're taught to be grateful for the joys and the blessings in our lives. And we are here tonight doing just that. And I'm delighted to tell you that the mayor and council of the borough of Highland Park have adopted a proclamation honoring the Highland Park Minyan on our 50th anniversary. It's really my great pleasure to introduce you to Matt Hirsch, who is the president of the Highland Park Borough Council, who is here to share the proclamation with us. Matt.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much, Judy, and thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It is truly humbling to be here to celebrate with you on this 50th anniversary, and it's really wonderful to see so many friends, new and old, and soon to be new acquaintances as well. It is truly an honor to be here, and once again to read this proclamation. On Tuesday night at our council meeting, we read this proclamation into the record, and even then, just to have the sense of community, the sense of community spirit, the sense of togetherness, the sense of support, and a safe space for all of us to be is so important, especially right now. And when I look at this room, I see that togetherness. This is not the first community event I've been to today, and it is just so heartwarming and comforting to know that there are organizations and there are communities for us to be part of, for us to share with, and for us to receive comfort, in these safe spaces. So again, thank you very, very much for having me. Congratulations on 50 years too, and here's to another 50 years. So I will read this proclamation on behalf of Mayor Elsie Foster, who sends her regards, and who couldn't be with us tonight. But yes, thank you very much. And so this is from the Office of the Mayor, proclamation in honor of the Highland Park Minyan. Whereas the Highland Park Minyan has been meeting in Highland Park, New Jersey since the early 1970s for prayer, study, community, and community service. And whereas the Highland Park Minyan is a peer-led, egalitarian, post-denominational, innovative, volunteer-run, participatory, and inclusive Shavara. And whereas the Highland Park Minyan welcomes all Jews and all those who are interested in Judaism. And whereas the Highland Park Minyan services are filled with joyful participatory prayer and in-depth Torah study with lively Torah discussions, and whereas the Highland Park Minyan uses the innovative and popular prayer book Siddur Edratzan, which was created by a Highland Park Minyan member, and whereas the Highland Park Minyan members rely on each other when they need help and support from each other through the milestones and vicissitudes of life, and whereas the Highland Park Minyan has a deep commitment to Jewish learning and holds classes and study lessons and study sessions to learn, read, discuss, debate, and thoroughly enjoy the richness of Jewish learning. Whereas the Highland Park Minyan and its members have a deep and lasting commitment to healing, transforming, and repairing the world, known in Hebrew as Tikkun Olam. And whereas the Highland Park Minyan and its members have a deep and lasting commitment to healing, transforming, and repairing the world, pardon me, again, known in Hebrew as Tikkun Olam. That stanza was so good I had to read it twice. The Highland Park Minyan has for many years organized an innovative and impactful tzedakah collective where members pool their resources and decide communally which charities to support each year. And whereas the Highland Park Minyan regularly supports the Highland Park Food Pantry and the Highland Park Edison Peace of Mind program. Whereas the Highland Park Minyan remains a vibrant center of Jewish life and values in Highland Park. And whereas the Highland Park Minyan is celebrating the 50th anniversary of its founding and 50 years of Jewish community. And I am again speaking on behalf of the mayor here. Now therefore, I, Elsie Foster, Mayor of the Borough of Highland Park, Middlesex County, New Jersey, hereby congratulate the Highland Park Minyan on its 50th anniversary and extend personal warm wishes to all of the members of the Highland Park Minyan. In witness thereof, I hereunto send my hand this 10th day of December, 2024. Mayor Elsie Foster. Thank you, sir.
Matt, thank you very much. Those were very kind words. The proclamation, not exactly the work of the mayor, although we'll give her some credit, but Judy Richmond certainly had a hand in it. So thank you, Judy, for initiating this and arranging it. Really a nice touch. So I think that this occasion really calls for a Shehecheyanu prayer that all of us should recite together. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehecheyanu v'kimanu v'hilyanu l'zman ha'azeh. Thank you, God, for sustaining us and allowing us to live for this wonderful moment. Amen. So we're about to have dinner. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please feel free to continue eating, or even if you want more, to go to the buffet table. But we're going to continue now with our program of speakers, which will include you as well. Now, it's been pointed out to me that Shula and Naftali Minsky were there at the beginning, particularly of the services. So I want to acknowledge their very early participation. In addition to which, their son Yair had the first bar mitzvah in the Minyan. And our daughter, Ilana, as far as I know, had the first bat mitzvah in the Minyan. So those are worth mentioning. All right, so now, as I mentioned before, we have 3 speakers, after which I'm going to ask people to come up to share with us what they remember, a memorable moment, a reminiscence, what the Minyan has meant to them, etc. So, our first speaker is Deborah Schiff, another stalwart of the Minyan who has got everything, including having been chair. Deborah.
What 1993. Our boys were young, 9, 7, and 4. Most of their friends went to the Highland Park Conservative Temple, but we couldn't bring ourselves to join a place of worship where women were not equal participants. Instead, we joined the Minyan because we wanted the boys to feel our excitement and experience a sincere connection to Judaism. The Minyan has been and continues to be a place where we have grown as individuals and as Jews in varying ways. During the first high holidays we spent with the Minyan at the YMYWHA, we all learned about cooperation in davening, in childcare, in cleaning, in cooking, real socialist ideals, working together for the greater good. The boys made friends at the Minyan, but we all realized that everyone's children were bored after an hour of shul. So the need for a children's program pushed me to create one. It made me create games, both active and passive, that were connected to the Parsha of the week for about 2 years, until we hired a real Jewish educator. To this day, I think about connecting Parshas to games. I just can't help myself. After one Minyan child knocked over Judy Storch and Rob Sherrill's bedroom door, we moved to the Second Reformed Church of Highland Park. The need now was how to make our new space feel like holy space. A challenge David and I both embraced. David made layouts of different chair placements. I purchased 2 lovely rugs, one to put in front of the ark and one for the kids to play on. Now the ark and the stender looked old. So, another challenge, we embraced it. The challenge made me appreciate why Hashem blessed Bezalel's creativeness, as his name means, in the shadow or protection of God. One Torah was all the Minyan had, but we really needed 2. It happened that my parents' synagogue in Union, New Jersey was folding, and they were offering 1 Torah to a member of their congregation who could write the most moving essay on why they should receive such a gift. It happened that the Torah they were offering was purchased by my grandfather. I felt with all my heart that his Torah belonged to my family and would find a wonderful home in the Highland Park Minyan. I wrote the essay, and Hashem blessed us with the Sadowitz Torah. How do you move a Torah? It's a gift, a bride. So we danced it out under a homemade chuppah, recognizing all the families who were part of our special Minyan family. The Minyan brought out the artistic side in me and the musical side in David. He learned to chant, drum, and sing Pesukei, went to Joey Weissenberg's workshops, and before you knew it, joined a klezmer band. Psalm 150 says, praise Hashem with the harp and drum, and that's what we did. The Minyan was our community. All 3 of our boys were bar mitzvahed with the Minyan, embracing our family and loving us up in sickness and in health. You know the story of how 3 blind people describe an elephant? One describes the long trunk of an elephant, one describes its ears, one describes its tail. Well, the Minyan has been different things to me at different times in my life. The Minyan gave me a Jewish avenue to egalitarianism, artistic creation, musical expression, and led me to my first position of leadership, and even to having an adult bat mitzvah in which I finally learned to chant Torah and Haftorah. But it was the Devars that led me deeper into understanding why being a Jew is so much more. The wisdom Judaism teaches is deep. I recently took my grandson to the Franklin Institute where there was an exhibit on black holes. We talked how Hashem pulled the light from the dark, and that the dark was probably black holes. Cool, said my grandson. It's because of the Minyan that I am now studying Torah and Talmud. So what I am telling you is that I am grateful to the Highland Park Minyan for letting me grow not only as a person, but as a Jew. Let me end with a special blessing found in Eitz Ratzon. I thankfully acknowledge you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe. You have blessed me with a supportive community. And let us say, Amen.
Thank you very much, Deborah. That was really wonderful. Very wonderful. So our next speaker is someone who, it can be said, grew up in the Minyan. Since she was neglected by her parents, someone had to help her out, and it was indeed the Minyan. So I will call upon Ilana Messer-Weil to speak.
It was benign neglect. I'm considered old enough to be asked to speak, but I'm not old enough not to be nervous around microphones. So if you cannot hear me, raise your hand. Perfect. Okay. So I was asked to share some memories of growing up in the Minyan. And I don't really know the difference between growing up in the Minyan and just growing up. But when I thought about early associations with the Minyan, the first thing that came to mind was folding chairs. A lot of folding chairs upstairs, folding chairs downstairs, folding chairs being carried up and down the stairs, a lot of schlepping. Cardboard boxes filled with sidurim and chumashim and paper goods. I remember we met in each other's homes all the time. I remember a lot of beds piled with coats. The grown-ups were usually in the living room or the main living area, and the children were usually sitting on the stairs or underfoot or pulling books off people's bookshelves and reading them. But I remember a lot of schlepping. And I remember that sometimes there was Torah in our living room. And when there was the Aron and the Torah in our living room, chances were good that there was unfamiliar Tupperware in our kitchen, or a serving spoon that had been making the rounds for months that nobody knew who it belonged to. There was always something from somebody else's kitchen in somebody else's kitchen. Those are some of the early memories. I remember we had retreats at the Miller's farm. Lynn and Art Miller owned a farm out in the country somewhere. Where was it? Anybody know? Where? Spring. It was somewhere. And the Minyan had retreats there. What, Mira? Do you want to share with the whole class? No, okay. And there was a barn with a loft, and there were cows, and we davened outside, and there was a campfire, and one year there was a square dance. I think you hired a caller, and there were lots of kids. I remember like 10 or 20 sleeping bags lined up on the floor, at the Miller's farm. That was always something we looked forward to every year. And I remember the Minyan list, which is a printed list of everybody's names and addresses and phone numbers. There were no email addresses and there were no area codes because there was no 10-digit dialing, but the Minyan list was always next to our phone in the kitchen, and it was always tattered from getting so much use. And later I came across the expression about being raised by a village, but this was really the village that raised me, and it was very Hamish, literally being in each other's homes. And being part of each other's lives. There was an emergency once. We had a family emergency in Montreal. My parents were out of town. Beth drove us to the airport. When Judy had a baby, as she frequently did, my mother brought a pot of chicken soup over to the Rosensteins, and so Joe needle-pointed a cushion as a thank you for my parents, which is still on the couch in our living room. And there was just a sense of all being very much in each other's lives. Another piece of my Minyan childhood, of course, was my bat mitzvah, which was, I think, the first bat mitzvah in the Minyan. And while my sister Leora had her bat mitzvah at the Hyatt Hotel in New Brunswick, and Tova's bat mitzvah was at the Y, my bat mitzvah was in Lynn and Art Miller's house on North 9th, maybe. They emptied out all the furniture, and I remember my father being in there with a tape measure and figuring out how many, comes back to the folding chairs. Yes?
No, 1 minute.
Well, oh, 1 minute. 1 minute to go or 1 minute down? Okay, I'll speed up a little bit. They fit 100 people into Lynn and Art Miller's house for my bat mitzvah. This is a little embarrassing, but it wasn't until I was in college that I realized that the Minyan was on a triennial laning cycle, because I laned the whole parsha at my bat mitzvah, and it didn't occur to me that not everybody else had done so. And later I asked why that was, and my father said, well, I did it, so I figured you could do it too. Thanks, Daddy. Something else to note about my bat mitzvah is that I was taught to put together Dvar Torah by Miriam Fine, who lives in Jerusalem now, and taught to lane by Dave Sigmund, who is here tonight. And another thing that I remember distinctly about my bat mitzvah is that my friends were not allowed to come, because their parents found out that I was going to be reading from the Torah, and that did not fly. So my friends were not at my bat mitzvah. It wasn't until a little bit later also that I came to realize that it was a little bit wild, the Minyan and some of the radical things that it did, and the biggest and wildest radicals behind it were Stanley and Donna Messer. You don't really appreciate this until you understand that they came from a synagogue tradition where even the conservative synagogues had mechitzas and separate seating, and to this day, the machers sit on the bima wearing top hats. That is where Mommy and Daddy were coming from. So when you think that they got involved with this radical counterculture, practically anarchic undertaking, it really makes you appreciate that they're the wild children in this room. I would just say also that something like 40 years after my bat mitzvah, Sean and I celebrated our son's bar mitzvah in Boston, and it was very Minyan style. We sort of took over the shul. It was mostly lay-led. Members of the family did all of the leading the services and the laning, and I taught my son the laning that Dave Sigmund had taught me, and my friends from Highland Park came to the bar mitzvah, and they finally got to hear me lay.
Well, if I want to know or determine whether a talk was a good talk, I look at my wife and I see if she's crying. If she is crying, which she is, you can't see her, but I can, and Lana, it was great. So now we turn to our leader and founder, Joe Rosenstein. There's a great deal I can say about Joe, but he keeps so active Jewishly in writing books. And this afternoon we had a class with him in Pirkei Avot, for example. So it's wonderful that he is still going strong, even if he's no longer a marathon racer. Okay, that's okay. So Joe, please come up and grace us with your remarks.
Out of the mail.
He needs it.
So I probably should have, some of the things that I'm going to say you already heard about, but so you'll hear about it a second time. So, good evening. My job tonight is to talk about the history of the Highland Park Minyan and the highlights of our existence. So you will forgive me, but I can only do this in 10 minutes. So you will forgive me if I forget to mention important events or important members or what happened when. Now, I can see that I need this chair to support me, but this is in the wrong place for the microphone, so let me move it. If you can put that up there.
Raise
Good,
the mic.
much better. Okay.
He's a tall guy.
Okay, much better. Good. Put it upside down. So, why did we form a Minyan? It was certainly an outgrowth of the 1960s. Synagogues were seen as large and impersonal institutions. We wanted a small community. Services at synagogues were seen as performances by the rabbis and cantors, with the congregation as their audience. We wanted services performed by our members, with God as the audience. In synagogues, you had to be careful of what you said, or you might be rejected or ejected. We wanted every person to be able to be free to express his or her opinions, and we wanted uncensored discussions in our services instead of sermons. And of course, we wanted to be egalitarian, with men and women playing equal roles, both in theory and in practice. Egalitarian services were not too common 50 years ago. Egalitarian also meant that every person should participate in our activities fully, leading discussions, reading from the Torah, chanting the Haftorah, leading services. So study groups were part of our regular program to help members develop the skills that they were missing. And over the years, many of our members have acquired these skills. Our main activities were always prayer services. The phrase that would best describe the Highland Park Minyan was, quote, participatory, egalitarian prayer community, unquote. I wouldn't add all the adjectives that were in the proclamation, but some of them apply. We would certainly add spiritual and experimental to that description, particularly in the initial years. As time passed and we grew older, the Minyan became more conservative. Our Shabbat morning services began over 50 years ago, as you've already heard, probably in 1972 or 1973. I think maybe 71, but we're not sure. There's not too much documentation around. We met at Hillel because Steve Shaw, Zichrono Livracha, was the assistant rabbi of Hillel at the time, and one of his talents was introducing people who needed to know one another. Among the initial people at the Minyan, initial people at Hillel, as Stanley mentioned, were Donna and Stan Messer, Rafe and Rhoda Zoller, Judy and myself, the Minskys, and also soon afterwards, Miriam Ball joined the Minyan. She just visited the Minyan a few months ago at one of our services. And two other couples who joined us early, if not at the beginning, were Art and Lynn Miller and Ken and Lil Kesson. The only one of the original members who had participated in a participatory Minyan was Rafe Zoller, who had attended a Minyan at the University of Chicago. Before we started the Minyan, I had only led traditional services, and I was very good at it because I did it very quickly. People enjoyed finishing services quickly those days. So I remember my own anxiety when I first needed to lead the kind of participatory services that we wanted to have. It was really strange to me. We hoped to attract Rutgers students to our group. That's why we met at Hillel, but that didn't happen. So after a year or two, we moved from Hillel to Highland Park and met in the homes of our members, as you have heard. It was probably then that we started calling ourselves the Highland Park Minyan. So we may be known as the Highland Park Minyan for less than the number of years we've existed. Hillel loaned us a Torah, which we used for many years until we bought our own Torah. And then many years later, Dvorah Schiff, as she mentioned, procured our second Torah. Many people joined the Minyan in the 70s and the 80s, including Mark and Ellie Render, Ruth and Mel Schulman, David Rogoff, David Sigmund and Joanne Rosenberg, Margaret Ingate and David Simon, Bobby Rosowski, Sue Gulak, Tzvi and Lucille Bar-David, Neil Reisner, Mimi and Dan Bro, Laura and Abe Spicer, Abe and Barbara Osofsky, Ben and Gladys Leibowitz, Mike Rosenberg, Joan and David Ehrenfeld, and probably some more who I've forgotten. Sorry. I have no idea in what order they joined. Of course, Jerry Serrata was in the Minyan while he was Rabbi at Hillel in the late 70s. And later, Herschel and Gustine Matt, Zichronam Livracha, were members. Neither Jerry nor Herschel wanted to be rabbis of the Minyan, just ordinary members, and that's what they were. Mark Render worked with me in my basement to create an ark for the Torah, which we used for many years, until David Schiff designed and commissioned the construction of a majestic new ark, which we have used since then. Bobby Rosowski designed the Torah cover using my suggestion that it consists of 10 figures dancing in the Torah. If you didn't know that was the case, the next time you're at the Minyan, check it out. And you'll see 10 figures dancing in the Torah. I did the needlepoint, and Laura Spicer sewed it all together. We've had many bar and bar mitzvahs over the years. You've heard about some of them. A list of them is incorporated into the beautiful quilt that Devorah Schiff created about the Minyan. Perhaps the most unusual one of them was the triple bar mitzvah of David Bro, Jane Ehrenfeld, and my daughter Ariella at the Y and at the Highland Park Temple. Just to mention, Ariella and Jane remain friends, and Ariella conducted Jane's second marriage a few weeks ago in David Ehrenfeld's apartment. Another unusual bat mitzvah was that of my daughter Dahlia, which included dance performance at Bartley School. Some of you may remember that. We started Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur services in about 1984, 40 years ago. The first services were in Center School, 1 year, and then we met in the basement of David Sigmund and Joanne Rosenberg for several years. And then we moved to the now long-gone Jewish Y, which was on the corner of Raritan and Adelaide Avenues. In those years, there were many children in the Minyan. So Donna Messer conducted a children's choir, and Judy Rosenstein wrote and illustrated a children's prayer book for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Of course, we also celebrated Purim and Hanukkah together, as well as the Chagim and Tisha B'Av, as we do to this day. As was mentioned before, Art and Lynn Miller had a farm in northwest New Jersey, and we had retreats there for several years before they sold the farm. Then our annual retreats moved to a 4-H camp, I think, which Joan Ehrenfeld had access to. Two memorable moments at these retreats were someone being chased by a bull at the Miller's farm. And I'm not sure whether that really happened or that was a fantasy. And an amazing double rainbow at the 4-H camp. After a few years, we were all older, so we wanted some facility that didn't quite resemble a farm or a camp. And we did a few more retreats at hotels or motels, most recently in Ocean Grove. What made the early retreats memorable was the presence, as Ilana mentioned, of many young kids. Another consequence of growing older was that the task of moving our possessions from one house to another every other Shabbat became too onerous. So then we started meeting at the Reformed Church, where we met for many years, until earlier this year, every other Shabbat. Both the room upstairs, where we met until going upstairs became problematic for some of us, and the room downstairs were really ideal prayer spaces, or we made them into ideal prayer spaces. For a while, we tried to meet every Shabbat, or perhaps have study sessions on the alternate Shabbatot, but we weren't large enough to sustain weekly services. Could we have grown larger? Yeah, I suppose so, but we never tried to actively attract people to the Minyan, because small was good. But we certainly never turned anyone away. We also started the Tzedakah Collective about 40 years ago, after several study sessions about tzedakah, and that has been going strong for all these years. and reflects the Tikkun Olam focus of Minyan members. That was organized by various people, but then the Ehrenfelds were in charge of it for a number of years. Then Laurie Friedman was in charge of it for a number of years, and it was just taken over by Charlie Lewitt this year. Over the years, we have collected and distributed a lot of money to a lot of organizations. Many Minyan members have participated in the Minyan's board over the years and have served as officers and as chair. And Jerry Savada just mentioned to me that when he was here, we didn't have officers and we didn't have a chair, we didn't have a board. So I don't remember that, but at some point along the way, we developed a structure. We have regularly had study sessions, including an annual session on Christmas Eve for a while. And of course, extended sessions on Shavuot that lasted for many hours when we were younger. The weekly study sessions that began a few months before COVID led to my writing and publishing 2 books on Pirkei Avot. We used the Silverman Siddur for many years, despite its many defects. In 2000, in anticipation of Miriam Dorman Langer's bat mitzvah that spring, I put together what would turn out to be the first draft of my Siddur, with the help of David Goldfarb and Jerry Langer, and the format that was kindly provided by the authors of the Friday night Siddur called Chaverim Kol Yisrael. The Siddur was received enthusiastically, and I was encouraged to turn it into a complete and published Siddur. The yellow Siddur was published in 2004, 20 years ago, and the red Siddur, which included Friday evening service as well as Shabbat morning services, was published in 2006. Nachzari Ratzon took another 5 years or so to develop. There are 2 moments that nobody said time? I'm okay? You're not going to cut me off. Okay, so in that case, there are 3 moments that I particularly want to mention. So first, Herschel Matt was very comfortable moving between masculine and feminine references to God. One Shabbat, in the middle of services at someone's apartment on 11th Avenue, I don't remember who lived there, Herschel was leading services in his usual way, talking about God interchangeably as masculine and feminine. And Judy Steigler, who only 2 of you probably remember, jumped up and shouted, "God is He! God is He!" and stormed out. That was a very shocking moment, one that could not possibly have occurred in a traditional congregation. So a second moment that I want to mention is this. Ronnie Trube wore a body cast for a full year to correct her scoliosis. And when it was removed, she came to the Minyan, which took place at the Messer's home, and recited the bracha of Matir Asurim, of thanking God for loosening her bonds. And then she spoke very movingly about that experience. So that moment was a very moving and memorable moment. The third one I want to mention from many, many years ago is about Ken Kesson, who also very few of you would remember because he left the Minyan, he left the community a long time ago. But he had the following situation. As a boy, he was never told that his mother had died. In those days, people wanted to, quote, protect children from grief. As a result, he didn't have an opportunity to mourn her loss. So I suggested that he sit Shiva for a week, 40 years after the fact. And he did that. That was also a moving and memorable moment. All in all, the Highland Park Minyan has had a very good run, fulfilling its goal of being a participatory, egalitarian prayer community, and has served as a caring community to its members. So, mazel tov to all of us who have participated in the Highland Park Minyan over the years. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek.
That was great, Joe. I think that Joe deserves He's standing. Oh, wait. Well, that was a terrific overview of 50 years, Joe. Really masterful. So, thank you very much. So I should mention, in case you think otherwise, I'm trying to look at that table in the back. After we have the open mic, we will be serving dessert, and there's coffee and decaf and so on. So we hope you'll stay. So this is the part of the program where you get to speak. We'll start with Jerry Trube, who is also goes way back in the Minyan and who wants to say a few words. Jerry.
Well, those are three very tough acts to follow. I'm Jared True, and I'm going to share the memories and feelings of a person for whom the Minyan was life-changing, but cannot share them herself. Thank you. That person is my late wife, Ronnie. These are the words that I believe she would have expressed, except that she would have been more articulate. So if you can picture my voice a couple of octaves higher. I grew up as an Orthodox Jew in Brooklyn. At age 10, I went to a camp in Israel where they spoke only Hebrew, and as a result, I became fluent in the language. Though my family became progressively more modern, we remained strict about Shabbat observance. When I married Jerry in 1974, we moved to Highland Park. I chose that community because it met my need to be in an environment where I'd feel fully comfortable as an observant Jew. Jerry and I joined the Highland Park Conservative Temple, and there we became friends with Mark and Ellie Render. The Renders told us about this minyan where men and women were equally involved in leading services. I confess that this made me feel uncomfortable, and I resisted going. But finally, Jerry convinced me to give it a try. At that time, the Minyan met in people's homes, and I began to feel a part of a community. And it wasn't long before I overcame my discomfort with women chanting Torah and started doing it too. Over the 12 years, I led services, chanted Torah and Haftarah, and was part of the Minyan leadership. And it was at a Minyan Shabbat that I named my daughter Leora, and many of you were at the Brit Milah of Daniel. No less important were the deep friendships that I developed, most notably Lucille Bar-David and Terry Maines. There were, of course, others here today, and some that are not. And it was Joe Rosenstein and Lucille who spoke at my funeral. Though I can't join you for this celebration, I wanted you to know how the Minyan changed my life and made me feel fulfilled as a Jew. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. That was really very moving. And as someone who knew Ronnie well, it was a tremendous loss, both for obviously Jerry, but for the whole Minyan at that time. I just want to amend one thing that Joe said, although everything else I think was accurate, and that is that Rafe Zoller was mentioned as having brought Minyan experience from Chicago. That was true of Rhoda as well. They were married at the time, and they were members of what was known as the Upstairs Minyan in Chicago. So they had a certain level of expertise that the rest of us didn't have in the Chavrot and Minyanim. So Neil Reisner has indicated to me that he would like to speak.
I almost decided not to speak because my voice may crack and I may lose it, and that would ruin the image of a tough newspaper reporter that I pretend to be. I came to the Minyan. I met Joe at a Havara conference just after I graduated Columbia University in 1981. And meeting Joe was a whole other experience when I saw this person who looked like a bear and came around to the other side and the bear was doing needlepoint. I got a job here in New Brunswick at the Home News newspaper. I had no idea where Highland Park was. Could have been another planet. But someone at the newspaper told me that that's where the Jews live, and in that tone of, with that subtext. And somehow I ran into Joe, who brought me into the Minyan. And I told him yesterday that changed my life. As many of you know, I tend to speak my mind. I tend to say what I need to say. And all of my life, I felt like I was on the outside looking in. The Minyan was the first place where I didn't. And I thank Joe for that. And I thank all of you for that. We left Highland Park 28 years ago, intended to be gone for 3 years. But here I am, because I'm still part of the Highland Park Minyan. And I come as much as I can. When I lived in New York for 6 months a few years ago, I didn't enjoy New York. I came down here for Shabbat every week. It's my home. It's my shul. It's where I live. It's where the kids I saw grow up came over to talk to me tonight, which was very touching. So thank you, Joe. Thank you, Minyan. Thank you.
What a testament that was to the power of the Minyan for some people. So, Rabbi Sue Gulak has put her hand up, so she is next.
So the Minyan was very foundational for me. I was a very confused college student, active in the Reform movement, but also trying to figure out what conservative Judaism, traditional Judaism was, but as a woman who wanted to be a rabbi, feeling very excluded. And I am very blessed that Jerry directed me towards the Minyan. And I found a place to experiment and to feel at home in more traditional prayer settings, although I do remember, I think, Joe, it may be part of the morning that you're thinking about, that I did some readings that had shown up in Moment magazine by Marcia Falk, and people were really upset, and that took over the entire Torah discussion that morning, because it was about God sheltering us in the soft folds of her skirt. So I do remember that. I remember your children climbing up you and sliding down you like a ladder, and especially in one chair in the Messer's house that was just perfect for that for them. And I have gone on from there to be chair of the National Havara Committee. And so this is like a huge part of what was foundational and formational for me. I joke with the Messers that the first time I attended, the Torah discussion was on why Moses stuttered. And Stan, you said to me once, and you came back after that? But I did, and I came back frequently over the years when I was living in New Jersey and going to school still, even though I wasn't in Highland Park. So I miss this community, and I had to come back to share this. So thank you all. For our teachers, for our students and the students of the students, and all who occupy themselves with Torah, which is really this Minyan. May we all be blessed. Amen.
listening to Sue reminds me of just how much talent we had in the Minyan. People who knew how to talk, to speak, to give divrei Torah, to read tefillot, and so on. Thank you very much for coming forward. So, I see a hand in the back, but I can't see who it is. Jeff. Oh, Jeff Axelbank. Okay, Jeff, you're on.
So, I'm sure I'm going to crack. So, but I think of Leonard Cohen. You know, everything has a crack. That's where the light comes in. So, I grew up in an Orthodox synagogue, and I learned how to read the Torah portion for my bar mitzvah from a record. And then I came to the Minyan, where there's this weird idea that we should understand what we were saying. And so I just want to share a couple of memories that are very memorable. One was, I remember David Rogoff did a Devar Torah on Yom Kippur about Jonah. And the Devar Torah was that Jonah came into Highland Park and said, God is going to destroy Highland Park. And he broke us into breakout groups to find out what are we going to do. And it was just so moving to me for something to come alive like that. Then there was the Jonah plays that our children all acted in, which is a memory. And then my son Ilan, when he was pretty little, came to the Minyan, and he only wanted to sit with Jerry Langer. So I mean, I could say a lot more. We had, we hosted the Minyan at our house for the first time, which coincided with Maggie Bernberg's naming service. And that was just so moving to me to have that happen in our home. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to call two people up. The good rabbi has indicated it's a good idea to have one person on deck. So Jerry Serrata, if you would come up, and who else would like to speak? Yeah, Steve Eisdorfer. Okay. Come up, Steve. Sit here.
So as you've heard, I'm from the old days of the Minyan, between 1977 and 1982. And how far back was that? Well, in fact, Joe Rosenstein and I studied Talmud together. We were a chavruta, but we also played tennis together. So that's how far back it was. I mean, he's a very powerful and accomplished tennis player. I didn't move on the court very well, but he was still, his serve was something else. The other thing is, maybe the last time the Highland Park Minyan didn't meet in Highland Park, it met at 72C Phelps Avenue in New Brunswick, where I live. So at least one time, people from Highland Park came over to New Brunswick for a service in an apartment, which at that point was large enough for only 10 or 15 people. It was a very challenging time, actually, for the Minyan, but I'm happy that we made it. I looked in my basement for what I could bring in terms of material, and I found some Highland Park Minyan adjacent material, but I didn't look in my folder of Simcha Bat ceremonies, where I have a large pile of the children of Joe and Judy's services. They're not short either. They're full services for each of the 5 daughters, I think, and some of their the mitzvah also. But the context for the Minyan played a larger role, or the people in the Minyan played a larger role than just in Highland Park. One of those, the National Chavurah Committee has come up in terms of Sue now being the chair. Of course, Joe was the chair for a very long time. The first National Chavurah Conference was at Rutgers in 1979. So Highland Park is in some way generative of the whole Chavurah movement, in addition to the 2 or 3 other Chavurot or Minyanim that are a little bit older. And members of the Chavurah, and David and Joan Ehrenfeld have been mentioned in different ways. They were involved at Rutgers in what we call the Jewish Environmental Project, which so long before there were national Jewish environmental organizations in this community, there were people trying to apply Jewish tradition to environmental questions. And I also found in my file something called the Jewish Middle East Study Group. Paul Lehrer and Ruth Schulman and maybe Joe and maybe others of the community, I don't remember, were trying to figure out how we as Jews could contribute to bringing peace between Israelis and Palestinians, and which national organizations might we connect with, which Israeli organizations might we connect with. So this community and the Minyan itself and the members of the Minyan had a much broader impact than the beautiful impact on individual souls. This Minyan was a foundation for a lot of very, very powerful and important spiritual work way beyond Highland Park. So I'm delighted to be back. I was back for several of those the notes, but I'm glad to be able to be here to celebrate with those who made it and those who we all remember so fondly who are no longer with us. Thank you.
Brings back a lot of memories, Jerry. Thank you so much for making the trek to come here. Steve Eisner.
I don't want to postpone dessert very long. But I do want to explain why it is I live in Highland Park. So I've been living in Highland Park for 35 years. So I met and married Judy in 1982, and she was already a Chavurah veteran, having been members of Chavarot in Dayton, Washington, and at that point of the Germantown Minyan in Philadelphia. So she dragged me to the Germantown Minyan and Pedayor and other stuff. But I told her living in Philadelphia was always a temporary thing, because at that point I had a high-profile job in New Jersey, and I said sooner or later it's going to become politically inexpedient for me not to be living in New Jersey. And so in 1989 that became true. Johnny Lynch, who was the president of the Senate, gave a series of speeches demanding that I be fired and my boss be fired for not firing me, and always ending in, and he doesn't even live here. So I said to Judy, now is the time. So we said, where can we live in New Jersey that would be comfortable? And there weren't very many choices, because here we were embedded in the Germantown Minyan, we wanted something similar. So we said there are really only two choices in New Jersey, Princeton and Highland Park. So we came to Highland Park, and one of the first things we did is we came as guests to the Highland Park Minyan, and we said, this is home. And so we moved to Highland Park. So the Minyan is why we live in Highland Park.
Okay, so we'll have two people. Judy.
At the time when there were a number of 5-year-olds in the Minyan, we were still meeting in people's homes, and the parents were taking turns doing services. And Joanne Rosenberg Sigmund came up and said, it was about parapets, having to put parapets around the roof of your house so that nobody would fall off. Of course, our kids didn't know about flat roofs and drying your laundry on the roof and all that. So she had to explain that. And she said, but the reason was, what if somebody was just running around up there and fell off? And the kids looked, and she said, does this have anything to do with how we should behave? We don't have parapets on our roofs. And somebody said, well, if we left our toys in the middle of the floor, somebody might trip over them. And that was the first time that I understood how perfect the Minyan was at the task of learning Torah to behave better.
I wonder how many of you know that Judy wrote a book about the history of Minyanim and Chavarot, which I recommend to all of you. So let's see, we have the name of the book is Taking Judaism Personally. I should also mention she's written 2 other books, at least 2 that I know of, there may be more, going back to the time of the Romans, the Jewish community in the Roman and Talmudic times. I've read them and they're wonderful.
And you should certainly buy them because we've got several boxes.
If you didn't hear what Steve said, there are a few copies left. If you be in touch with him, you might be lucky enough to get one of them. Okay. Let's see, was there something else? Yes. So Steve mentioned Joanne Rosenberg. So on the off chance that I make it to heaven when I die, it will be by virtue of the fact that I introduced David Sigmund and Joanne Rosenberg to each other. And I mention that because it was at a Minyan. And I think it was at Ken and Lil Kessin's. They're nodding yes. So that's something significant as well and worth mentioning. Okay, communities too.
So thank you all for making these last 35 years so special.
David, you are indeed a very serious timekeeper. If you time even yourself.
I did not volunteer.
No, I know. I didn't say you did. I twisted your arm a little, but it didn't take much twisting because David is always ready to serve, really, and is again someone who's done so much for the Minyan on all fronts, both in the services themselves and as chair and as religious chair and so on. So thank you, especially David. Okay, Debbie Rebhun and David Rogoff, if you both, well, one of you come up and the other can come and have a seat here so they're ready to go. Debbie, maybe we'll start with you, and then David. And Mira, if you need a signal, are the desserts out there yet? You're going to speak? Okay. Good. Okay, so Debbie, and you are.
Can you guys hear me? Yes. So part of the reason I found the Minyan was I have a daughter who marched to her own drummer. She would go to the Highland Park Temple, and at the end of any service, she would come back telling me about this kid who pushed her, and that kid who pulled her, and that kid who told her to go away. And one exception was Nasa, who invited herself to our house one Shabbos. I had to ask her mother's permission because we had to drive to her house, and I didn't know how observant they were, but her mom said yes. And I remember them both going up on the roof, the 9th story of a tall building, and looking out. But eventually I heard about the Minyan, and I figured it couldn't be worse than the Highland Park Temple. Sorry, I didn't know. And I brought her there, and Becca got to play with the Shift children, and Becca got to play with the Shirelles. She had something that she would refer to as that's a kind of Shirelle thing. And all of a sudden, my kid, who never had anybody she was comfortable playing with, she also liked Leanne and Miriam, felt at home. And the other thing that happened was that I felt at home too. At the Highland Park Temple, when I stay, if I try to go to the room where everybody is, I've never found anybody to talk to. People wander around. Maybe Kira. Thank you. But at the Minyan, you guys are friends. You are people that I know about your lives. And I want to thank you for being there for me. And thank you for saving my daughter.
Saving your daughter, that's really quite something. Yeah, come up and have a seat up here.
I'll keep it very brief. At the time that I came out in the early 1980s, the Highland Park Minyan was the only place that I could accept an aliyah. Any place else I would have to go back into the closet to do that, including the Highland Park Conservative Temple. So that meant everything to me and saved my Jewish life.
I just wanted to tell about a dramatic event which happens in this Minyan by younger generation, Ilana Messer broke the leg of my son Yair.
Only one leg.
Only one leg, while dancing.
Well, I have to say that a few of you have mentioned Ilana Messer. So I'm very pleased to say that Ilana Messer has been Ilana Weil for about 6.5 years now. Tagala El, we're very fond of our son-in-law, Sean Weil. And as I've told him, there are no backsies here. So he's got it. Just teasing, of course, as you know I do.
That's true.
But it's true. Okay, so look, those who will help out with the Minyan, where's David? David, bring your group. Only men, by the way. Yes, David offers to set up a mechitza, by the way. So.
Hi. Well, I think I am the still kind of an outsider or whatever. But just so you know that the Minyan also went beyond United States borders. And when I met David in 2017, I came here for 4th of July, and then I came for Rosh Hashanah. We had dinner at the Messers, and I went to the Duets rehearsal at the shifts, and everything. I don't know even how to explain, but when we were only getting to know each other, but one year after that, when we decided to get married, I knew that I was going to be okay. And it's just because of the Minyan. I mean, not only because David and I love him, but because I knew that I had a home with me.
So, I don't quite remember how we got here, but Pam and I met in a Minyan in Los Angeles, which was then called the Westwood Free Minyan, which had actually 4 rabbis who were members of it. Richard Berner was the conservative rabbi and the Hillel director. David Berner, I'm sorry. Richard Levy, who was a wonderful liturgist from whom I learned to daven in Hebrew and English and go back and forth in the importance of doing that. Was a Reform rabbi and really one of my teachers. Chaim Seidlerfeller was there, and Daniel Dorfman was there. Anyway, I think it was Richard Levy who, when we moved to, after we were married and living in New Jersey and thinking of, I had a job at Rutgers at Robert Wood Johnson Med School, I think it was Richard Levy, who said, I think there's a Minyan in Highland Park where Joe Rosenstein is, which he knew from the Chaparral movement, and why don't you check it out? So, although a lot of people thought we came here because of the conservative tempo, of which we've been active members, it took a while because of the non-egalitarian piece to become members. But that's how we got here. So the first time we came to a Minyan was at the Ehrenfeld's house. And the first 3 males I met were David, David, and David. Okay? David Rogoff, David Ehrenfeld, and David Sigmund. So that was our, and I love that blue room, that red room, the sort of fight, I don't know what color red it is, but it was just this wonderful davening space. And we had a number of meals with them, and as we started having children, our babies and then our little children were always comfortable. We'd go to the Bros, we'd go to the Trubes, we'd go to the Ehrenfelds, and people really took care of us when we had little baby kids, you know, and that felt special. One of the other things, we've talked about how wonderful the Minyan is and how transformative it's been in all of our lives, which it has. But one of the other things I want to say is it hasn't always been smooth. So I came across, I sent a bunch of stuff to Stanley from my files, but I found a memo that went out in 1990, okay, saying, you know, we don't have enough energy in the Minyan. I'm not sure how long this is going to last. And we've been through that period more than once since we got here in 1986. And here we are in 2024, almost 2025. So this is a group that really perseveres, that really thinks through how to get through whatever is bothering us and getting to the next place and continuing on. And I think everybody has contributed to a spirit of let's get to the next place and we will get through whatever we think our current challenge is.
Thank you, Jerry. Jerry and Pam are a dynamite couple and do as much as anyone, perhaps more than anyone, for the Minyan currently and for the past many years. So thank you, Jerry and Pam. So we now have Dahlia Rosenstein Gorky-Mack. Did I get it right? Oh, I never get it right. All right.
Goker-Mack. It's phonetic. I have many memories. My whole childhood, right? My whole childhood of memories. I'm probably I can say safely, I'm on the younger end in this room. And I still don't have a lot of memories, but many core ones from the Minyan. So I did babysit for the first time for Pam and Jerry. That was a big milestone, where they left me alone with their child. That was crazy. But no, really, but the retreats, serious love for them, serious nostalgia. Every time I come to the Minyan, it's a big deal. But the most important thing is that I would be remiss if I heard everybody talk about the programs that they did for all these kids that came to the Minyan every year, but in reality, the best program that was done for the kids was the Bros waterbed that we were all on the whole time for years. That was our entertainment. You know, the older kids were upstairs and they'd sometimes come down and jump and we'd go in the corners and we would all jump around but that was trying to pop that waterbed was our favorite activity. So that is what it is.
Very, very funny, Dahlia. Nadine, I think you're on next. Where are you, Nadine? There you are. Who is after that? Who wants to speak? Is it Ellen or no, Eliza?
Hi, so as Dahlia was saying, I think I'm also safely on the younger end. As you might guess, I was not a founding member of the Minyan, and I've been here as you can probably guess from my appearance, I was not one of the founding members of the Minyan. I've only been at the Minyan for 14 years, which is quite a bit less than my entire life, having grown up in the Minyan, and quite a bit less than 50 years. But I distinctly remember the first Minyan Shabbat, where I feel like it was a Kabbalat Shabbat evening. I don't remember whose house it was. I want to say it was maybe somebody kind of in the discussion at dinner, I want to say maybe it was Abe Wasowski, made kind of an offhand comment about politics. And then Judy Richmond says very eloquently something about, I think maybe we shouldn't discuss politics. It kind of takes away from the Shabbat atmosphere. And then Joel Bassoff said, besides, we have so much that we can disagree on in the Torah. And this Minyan where we took, the spirituality of the services and the beauty of Shabbat and also with a sense of humor, I just knew that this was the right place to be. And it's, I know David Goldfarb talked a lot earlier about kind of growing up in the Minyan as an adult, and I feel like I did that as well, whether it was the ritual rules, I've become a better Torah reader, and a better gabbai. I didn't actually know how to gabbai at all before I joined the Minyan, and I've learned now somewhat out of necessity, but I've taken it in terms of the ritual rules, but then also the leadership rules, being on the board, being the treasurer, and that's really been very cool. I brought my then boyfriend who had grown up Orthodox to the Minyan the first time, and I thought, I didn't know how that would work out, but Ari was really drawn to Joe Sidor. And, we might not have had our bar bat mitzvahs at the Minyan, but if you come to the Messers for Shabbat this week, you can actually hear Ari do his bar mitzvah anniversary Torah reading as a show. And it's been really cool to hear all these memories of the Minyan. I think I've been asked sometimes, why the Minyan? There are no young people there. But I think a community is more than that, and I think one thing that's really incredible, hearing some of these stories, is it might have been very easy for, those three households that Stan Messer mentioned earlier, it could have been very easy for these three couples of friends, it would have been very easy to keep that just as a clique, for them to just stay as a clique and not bother with creating services and just hang out socially and really not progress beyond that. But the fact that they created services and opened it up and really went beyond, just a clique of friends, and made that last for a very long time, even beyond the necessity of, having to, meet somebody or having to raise kids, and just kept it going, perhaps even when it didn't have to, and brought other people in who, were at various different stages. And I think that's really, really, really incredible. And I've seen a lot of, I've been a part of a lot of younger person, social groups that I think could really take that as some inspiration. And I think the other thing I wanted to end on is that I think it's so beautiful that we can go back and reflect on like the Minyan of the past and all these past memories. It's really beautiful. I want us to also not think too mournfully, perhaps, like it might be tempting perhaps to think maybe mournfully like, oh, this was like the community we had before and now we don't have that, or oh, like there used to be so many children and now there are not so many children. And maybe forget to appreciate and celebrate, what we have here in the present. So if I can end on that, I just would like to do that. I think the Minyan's really special. Thank you.
Nadine has filled a very important role in the Minyan, namely as treasurer. And she's the kind of treasurer who hasn't absconded with the funds. And maybe because we don't have much in the funds. She's also, you've heard of the fastest gun in the West. Well, Nadine is the fastest laner in the West. She is terrific. She really knows how to lane. So she's been a big help in that way as well. Eliza and Judy, are you going to speak next? Yes.
Tall, Nadine. So I just want to thank the Minyan for being here for me when I transitioned from New York and I moved here. I had been part of a chavara on the Upper West Side and I had been really happy there. But then I met this guy, and there's no way that he was going to live in New York City. And so, that's you. And so, we got married, I moved to Highland Park, and I felt really lost. And then there was this guy who was living in David's building at the time, his condo. His name was Neil Reisner. And David must have been talking to him about his worry about me, this Jewish woman coming, even though David was Jewish, but this coming into town, what is she going to do? And Neil said, I got a minyan for you. And so it was great because he introduced me to the minyan, and it really became a real transitional space, because I was really sad for the first 3 years that I lived here, because I really didn't have my community. Not just my Jewish community, but also all of my friends. I was in graduate school at the time. Everything was in New York. And it was hard. It was really, really hard for me. But what helped things change was as soon as I gave birth to our first child, our daughter Lena. And we had her baby naming at the Minyan. It was really, really beautiful. It was in June. It was a hot day. It was at the church in the, I think I got a cake. Remember the German chocolate cake from Somerville Bakery? What was it called? Gaston Avenue Bakery. And we named her at the Torah. And it was really beautiful. Okay, I'm promising. And we were just so delighted that the Minyan welcomed us in this way and had this baby naming. And one of the most memorable things, though, is David and I are just kind of starstruck and stunned. And David Ehrenfeld comes up to me and says, you better watch that baby. She looks really hot. Babies don't regulate their temperature like you think they do. And we looked at her, and she was, it just kind of like caved over. She was fine. But that kind of wisdom in the Minyan was always appreciated. It's a wealth of knowledge. So, and now she's fine, and she's getting married and all. But I want to thank you, really, for providing this home for me, for the kids when they were little. I can remember bringing Lena to the upstairs room at the annex, and her sitting on the rug on the floor just playing with blocks. So thank you, and it's just so wonderful to celebrate 50 years.
Thank you, Eliza. So, as you heard earlier, Eliza was one of a 3-person planning committee for this event, and there was lots of planning to do, and she was just terrific to work with. So, thank you for your talk and for all the work that you did. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce a very distinguished professor at Rutgers, Judy Storch. Sorry,
You did not have to do that.
No, I didn't.
Dean Messer. So I thought I would just quickly tell you our Minyan origin story. So it was about 1993. Rob and I had moved to Highland Park from Boston in August of 1992, and we had a 3-week-old and an almost 2-year-old. 2 new jobs, 2 new labs, 2 little babies. We were exhausted constantly, and we were getting ready, and we were not particularly active Jewishly. I had grown up Orthodox and had really moved away, largely because of egalitarian issues, and we really didn't have a Jewish community. Tried out the temple, it's not egalitarian, that was a non-starter. And so there I was in it wasn't Stop and Shop then, it was something else. Food Town or Edwards or something like this. Standing, it was in April, Pesach was coming up. I was just exhausted. It was 11 o'clock at night staring at the matzah. And there's another woman standing next to me who's also exhausted and staring at the matzah, and it's Donna Messer. And somehow Donna and I started talking, and she told me about the Highland Park Minyan. And it sounded interesting, and so Donna, you know, Donna's very persistent, right? So Donna called me, she took my number and she called me, and it turned out that the next Minyan was meeting at their house. And so she said, you know, please come to the Minyan. I said, okay, this sounds interesting and we can bring the kids, great. And she said, and you know, it's a potluck, so why don't you make some egg salad? And I thought, okay, you know, I don't usually make egg salad. So there it was Friday, and so I wanted to like make it before Shabbat because I was bringing it to the Minyan. So I had to come home early from work, buy the eggs, boil the eggs. They don't peel. And I'm like thinking, why did I say it? I have no time. But anyway, made the egg salad, came to the Minyan, and it was really great. It was really, really.
The egg salad was great.
So despite, you know, thinking like, I don't have 1 extra ounce of energy, you know, at that point in our lives, but it was really a fortuitous meeting over the matzah. And the other thing that happened at the Minyan at that first Minyan was that one of the, people were very friendly in general. One of the people who I ended up speaking to a lot was this very, very handsome guy, and David Rogoff. See, you don't even remember. And after Rob and I are walking home, and he says, okay, so who was that guy you were talking to for all this time? And I said, don't worry, honey. That's my Minyan origin story. And here we are, 30 years later.
What led me to introduce Judy as a distinguished professor at Rutgers, which she is that Donna and I had a friend from Montreal who eventually became quite a considerable researcher and professor in the medical school at Columbia University. So when we saw him once, he says, you know, you have someone at Rutgers who's a terrific researcher, is really doing wonderful work. We said, who? Judy Storch. That's what he said. So we heard it, validated in that way. So, okay, you're next.
So I'm just going to take the opportunity for some public thank yous. First, David Rogoff, I don't know if you remember, but you told me about the Minyan. We were standing on the corner of Raritan and 4th. We bumped into each other, and we knew each other because we were both at the time on the board of Jewish Family Service. And I said I was shopping for a congregation. He said, come to the Highland Park Minyan. I'm like, what's that? And you described it, and here we are all these years later. So thank you, David. Also, thank you to the amazing people who taught our boys for preparation for their bar mitzvahs. Our kids didn't go to Schechter. They went to Gesher, yay Gesher. A little shout out to Gesher Progressive Hebrew School. Thank you. And so, you know, they needed to learn. And so David Goldfarb was one of their teachers, and Jerry, of course, the fabulous Jerry, and Neshama, who dealt with Sam. Thank you so much. Not an easy customer. The one and only Paul Breslin, who sat with Ben and had so many amazing discussions about his Parsha, which was Jacob wrestling. I mean, they talked and talked and talked and talked about this Parsha for hours upon hours, and it was very, very
Happy
beautiful.
anniversary.
What's that?
It's last Shabbat. Happy anniversary.
Yeah, thank you. The other thank you is for the opportunity. I also grew up in a conservative temple, non-egalitarian, and my bat mitzvah was on a Friday night. We got to lead the service, woohoo! But we didn't read from the Torah, no Aliyah, And so I was very grateful for a first aliyah that I had ever had with the Minyan, and also the first time I laned was at Ben's bar mitzvah, which I had never had the opportunity to do. So it was very, very special and still is. So thank you.
You know, it's quite amazing to hear how many people were inspired by the Minyan to learn Jewish things in the service, for laning, for leading services, and so on, which they might otherwise not have done, quite likely would not have done. And I have to tell you something else about Ellen and her partner Muffin. That is, they do things behind the scenes that are very important and that are typically either not noticed or unacknowledged. I can think of two things for sure. One is setting up everything for years at the parlor at the Reformed Church. And the other was running the Zoom part of the services and hosting people to come in. There are other things too, but thank you, two of you, for that. Well, let's see. It's 9:30. Oh, Donna wanted to speak. Yeah, how could I forget Donna? But I'll just say one thing about Donna before she comes up, and that Judy really got a sense of what it's like for me to be married to. The way Donna, first of all, befriended her, and then let her know about the Minyan, and told her what to bring, and told her, you know, I mean, she's my boss. So, Donna?
Before you start, Donna, how about this fabulous MC?
I will just expand on a brief comment that Joe made in his speech when he said that at the Miller's Farm retreat there was some episode with a cow and something like that. But I remember that very clearly. I had gone to this bonfire that the Minyan made for singing Hebrew songs and so forth, and I had a blanket on the floor, and I had like a 1-year-old baby or something, a little baby on the blanket, and the Jennifer, the miller's daughter, was way up the mountain with her black dog, and in between Jennifer with her black dog and the group that was having a kumsitz around the bonfire was a herd of cows. And Jennifer excited the dog, and the dog excited the cows, and the cows made a stampede right through our bonfire, and if I hadn't snapped the baby away from the spot, she would have been run over by a calf. I just really remember that very clearly. It was like, it wasn't what you would expect at a Minyan bonfire. Anyway, so that was one thing. Then the other thing is that Joe mentioned that there was a choir. There was a choir of children. I don't remember how old the children were, but I have most of their choir books here. So I have here, it says Lichvod Yom Kippur, but they sang this on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Leora Messer, Tova, who couldn't be here, Tamima Ehrenfeld, that's one of the Ehrenfeld daughters, Miriam Ehrenfeld, another Ehrenfeld daughter, David Bro, Mimi and Dan's son. He couldn't be here because, I don't know, but his parents couldn't be here because they have a cold, and Leora Messer. Okay, and there was another choir book that one of the children who used it in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur asked me if she could have it back to teach her children, so all these songs are, the music is written and all the words are written in Hebrew. There's no English in these, so you have things like Misot Hachamim Unevonim that you sing on Yom Kippur, Zachrenu L'chaim, and different tunes for all kinds of things. To the children, that wanted to teach her children from the book that she had sung on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
So I'm going to take her this, hustling them off of the microphone. I'm just kidding. We have an anniversary coming up in 2 weeks. It'll be 58 years. So Jerry, you had something?
I just wanted to mention one thing, looking around at Hope and the Rosenstein girls. I don't know, and the Messers and the kids, so-called, who grew up in the Minyan, and think about how active they have gotten in their communities, the roles they've played, and the lessons they learned from the fact that you don't rely on professionals to have a Jewish life. You make a Jewish life, and you can do that. And I think that will go through the next couple of generations.
Thank you, Jerry. You know, this is a good event for the Minyan, for us to be reminded of all the good things that have happened through the years, and just how significant the Minyan has been. So I appreciate all of you coming forward and sharing your very personal and moving stories with us. So this is the formal end of our program. I thank you all for coming, because without the kind of turnout we had here, it would not have been the same event. In case you're interested, we had roughly 80 people here. We almost rented a place, by the way, that took 50 people, and then said, well, we might have more. So fortunately, we decided on this venue rather than the original one. So, be well.